Chapter 5. Santiago. Ernesto became busier as the days went by. There were times when Santiago would only see his papa once throughout the day, and through sleepy eyes, but Santiago was used to this. When his mamá was alive, his papa worked long hours as a lawyer, at times leaving the house before Santiago woke up, and coming back when he was already in bed. The only difference was that this was something that his mamá and he had suffered together. Now it was just him. Still, he did not resent his papa for this. He knew his papa was working hard for both of them. "I can make a lot of money with your abuelo. In a couple of years, I'll be able to pay off all your mama's medical debts, and I'll be able to work less. When this happens, we'll move back into the lake house. Just the two of us." Santiago held his papa's words close to his heart. Despite the grandeur of La Hacienda, he missed their old life at the lake house. So he pushed down his loneliness and waited patiently for the promised day when they would be able to regain some piece of their previous life. In the meantime, he figured it would not hurt to distract himself by exploring more of La Hacienda. One activity he had always cherished was reading. Ever since he could remember, his parents had read to him, filling his imagination with wonder. Luckily, La Hacienda boasted a library that felt like a treasure trove, with tall shelves reaching toward the ceiling, a charming moving staircase, and rustic furniture that he could spend hours in. Most of the books were older, their spines cracked with age, but to his delight he discovered some of his childhood favorites, stories that his papa used to read to him on cozy afternoons. When he grew bored of reading, Santiago would spend time in the courtyard, admiring the vibrant array of plants and flowers, or dipping his feet into the cool pool, soaking in the warmth of the summer sun. The gentle breeze rustled the leaves above him, carrying the sweet scent of blooming flowers. Yet, even amidst this day, Santiago couldn't shake the memory of the girl with the silver hair he had seen from his windowsill. Despite exploring La Hacienda all week, he had not caught another glimpse of her. His papa had warned him to stay away from her, and Santiago prided himself on being a good boy who never disobeyed his father's wishes, even if he didn't fully understand the reasoning behind them. But still, he couldn't shake the nagging curiosity lingered in the back of his mind. On a particularly hot day, Santiago swished his tiny hand in the cool water of the courtyard pool, feeling the refreshing droplets dance against his skin. It was when he began to hear voices that he looked up and gasped. There she was again. The girl stood before him, dressed in a striking uniform of black boots, camo pants, and a fitted black t-shirt. Her silver hair was tied up in a high ponytail, cascading past her shoulders, and whooshing behind her with each confident step. Santiago felt frozen, unable to look away from her sudden appearance. He watched as she moved gracefully between two men, her presence contrasting against theirs. The older man in the front wore a tailored black three-piece suit, his tall frame imposing. His hair, a mix of deep black and silver, framed a face marked by furrowed brows and intense golden brown eyes that seemed to scan the surroundings with sharp precision. "Abuelo," Santiago whispered aloud, realizing who the man was. Despite living in La Hacienda, Santiago and his abuelo had never crossed paths. He recalled the last time he saw him, the rainy day of the funeral. As he was getting into the car, his papa suddenly stilled, ordering him to wait before closing the door behind him. Through the fogged window, Santiago felt the weight of his abuelo's gaze, intense and penetrating. Each time he turned to look, however, he found his abuelo's eyes locked on his papa's instead, an unspoken tension hanging in the air. Santiago watched the girl with silver hair confidently walk behind his abuelo, a small tingle of envy prickling at his chest. Her poise and the way she carried herself stirred something inside him, an admiration he couldn't quite place. Driven by curiosity, he followed her as quietly as he could, slipping around the corner and making his way toward the kitchen. As he peered around the doorway, he spotted his abuelo conversing with the two men beside him. One of them Santiago recognized instantly, Miguel. "Bien hecho, Anya," his abuelo gave the girl a pat on the head. "Go wash up and then see Antonio for some food, and get some rest. You did very well." The silver-haired girl gave a small nod, her expression unreadable, before she slipped out of the room. Santiago made a jerky movement to follow, but ended up almost knocking over a plant. The loud crash echoed in the kitchen. His abuelo and Miguel turned their gazes sharply toward him. Santiago's heart raced as he froze, embarrassment flooding his cheeks. Santiago, Miguel exclaimed with a look of surprise at first, but then he smiled. ¿Qué haces aquí? Santiago looked at his abuelo, who was staring at him with cold eyes, making him feel small and scared. I was looking for Papa. I thought he had come home, he rambled nervously. Santiago saw Miguel's dark brown eyes sadden. Lo siento, Santiago. He crouched down to meet his eyes. Your papa is still working, but he'll be home soon. I hope you're not getting too lonely without him. I know it's hard. Santiago shook his head. Though his focus was not on Miguel, it was fixed on his abuelo, who was striding toward him, his presence casting a long shadow that seemed to engulf them both. Miguel, sensing the shift, straightened and stepped away, allowing Javier to loom over Santiago, his gaze sharp and unyielding. His abuelo's eyes mirrored his own, and his papa's, but unlike theirs, they were cold and distant, devoid of warmth. Santiago felt a shiver run down his spine as Javier's furrowed brows deepened in displeasure. When his abuelo reached out a hand, Santiago instinctively flinched, bracing for a reprimand. But instead, Javier merely grasped a lock of Santiago's sunshine-colored hair, holding it between his fingers with a sneer of distaste. In that moment, silence stretched between them, heavy and suffocating. Without uttering a word, Javier turned and walked away, yet Santiago felt as if he had heard everything in that silence.